Hello boys, welcome back to another session of video tutorials, and this session is meant for class 11th biology students, and this is for 24th September 2020. We have been discussing about the central nervous system or central neural system of us human beings, and in that we said central nervous system consists of two mainly parts. One is brain and second is vertebral column or spinal cord. So we were talking yesterday about the three parts of the brain: forebrain, midbrain and hindbrain. So you can really recollect from this. Yes, as we have been talking of this. Yes, you may recollect from this. So it is the central central system consists of brain and backbone, and we said the entire brain is divided into three parts: forebrain, midbrain and hindbrain. So in forebrain there are three parts: cerebrum, thalamus and hypothalamus. And we said the cerebrum longitudinally into two halves, which are termed as left cerebral hemisphere and right cerebral hemisphere. They are connected by a track of nerve fibers called corpus callosum. The layer of cells which covers the cerebral hemisphere is called cerebral cortex. The cerebral cortex is referred as grey matter. So cerebral cortex is the grey matter. And why is it called? Due to its greyish appearance, due to concentration of neurons. It contains both motor as well as sensory areas. The regions are called association areas. So there is a motor neuron, sensory neuron and associated neurons. If associated neurons are there, those areas are called association areas. And they are responsible for intersensory associations and, look at that, memory and communication. That's why these are playing a very huge role in the forebrain. And the fibers of the tracts are converted, or they are covered rather. Fibers of the tracts are covered with a myelin sheath, inner part of cerebral hemisphere, opaque, white appearance, so it is called white matter. So there are two, grey matter and white matter. The cerebrum wraps around a structure called thalamus, which is a major coordinating center for sensory and motor signaling. And what about hypothalamus? It lies at the base of the thalamus. It contains a number of nerve centers which control, now this is important, body temperature. Hypothalamus controls body temperature. Normally your NEET exam question. Urge for eating and drinking. It also contains several groups of neurosecretory cells. They secrete hormones called hypothalamic hormones. Hypothalamus, it is involved in regulation of sexual behavior, expression of emotional reactions. So that is the importance of forebrain. Now come to midbrain. Midbrain is located just below the thalamus and hypothalamus. A canal called cerebral aqueduct passes through the midbrain. The dorsal portion of the midbrain consists of mainly four round lobes called corpora quadrigemina. Midbrain and hindbrain form the brain stem. Now come to the hindbrain, the last part of it. Pons consists of fiber tracts that interconnect different regions of the brain. And the second one is a cerebellum, has very convoluted surface. They provide extra space for many neurons, and medulla of the brain is connected to the spinal cord. It controls involuntary action. Now we are interested in this medulla, because medulla runs to form backbone, and this is responsible for involuntary action. Now what is voluntary action and involuntary action? Say I tell something to you and willingly you do it, then it is voluntary. And I tell something to you, and even if I don't tell also, you do it, then it is involuntary. Like for example, our heartbeat. Are we telling us our heart to beat continuously? Are we telling it to stop? Let's say the heart stops, and even if we say, come on my heart, start working, will it work? So it is involuntary. So medulla is responsible for that. Secretions of hormones by our glands, that is also involuntary. So anything that is involuntary, we call it as and reflex action. And what we define, how do you define? It's an immediate involuntary action. This is the thing. So reflex action is involuntary. This you must remember. Involuntary. And it is, another interesting thing you should know is, it does not involve brain. Only spinal cord is involved. There is no involvement of brain in this. So reflex action is an immediate involuntary action of any organ or any part of the body in response to particular stimulus. Okay, so it responds involuntarily for a stimulus. And yesterday I was telling you what is a stimulus. Any source, either internally or externally, that brings changes in our body or responses in our body. So I said, say early morning you get up and open the window, sunlight falls on your eyes and immediately you close the eyes. So there the stimulus is sunlight. And since sunlight is outside your body, we say external stimulus. So sunlight is external stimulus. Heat, for example, your mummy is preparing dosa, hot pan she has put on the stove. In your hurry you go and touch the hot pan, you get a shock, heat. So that's external stimulus. Similarly, you are just putting your hand and you try to put on a switch to put on a light, and if there is any short circuit there, you get a shock. That's a stimulus. So what is your response in all this? You withdraw your hand. When you touch the hot pan, you withdraw immediately, split second. You touch the electric wire where there is a passage of electricity, you immediately withdraw it. And as I said, closing of the eyes when you see the bright light, bright sunlight. So these are all external stimulus. What about internal? Like I said, secretion of hormones and enzymes by glands, that's internal. So here there will be two stimuli, internal stimulus and external stimulus. And to both, whether it is internal or external stimulus, our body shows responses. And if that should be involuntary, and if it's involuntary, then we call it as reflex action. Similarly, here you can see, for example, say you are walking, okay, you are just walking and barefoot, and a thorn goes inside your soul. So what is that you physically do it? You stop walking or running immediately, and immediately your hand will go to the sole and remove the thorn, and then maybe you will be having some pain. You start pressing that area, and if there is any bleeding also, you will stop running and put some first aid. So here the source stimulus is the thorn, and the feeling of pain, sensation of pain goes from the area, from your foot, let us say, to the backbone through a front pathway. You can see here. So immediately it goes to the backbone, and backbone has no time to send these signals to brain. Normally everything will go to the brain, but in this case, in reflex action, the spinal cord only will decide, and it immediately gives a signal through efferent pathway, through another set of neurons. They are called motor neurons. So these motor neurons will put the signal to muscles and bones present in your leg, and immediately the muscles and the bones present in your leg act appropriately. So there is a stimulus. For the stimulus of thorn entering into your palm, there is a response. What is the response? Withdrawal of the leg from that area. So here also he is giving you, so there is a response and there is a stimulus. So this stimulus response is very, very appropriate. And once the muscle spindle receptors, you can see receptors are organs that receive sensations. So afferent pathway, dorsal root ganglion, and as we said, white matter and gray matter in the backbone, and interneuron, and the signal goes to the gray matter, and the appropriate orders will be given to the motor neurons, and the motor neurons through efferent pathway will affect the changes, suitable changes. This is how the reflex action takes place. So reflex action is an immediate, you can't postpone it, there is no time for you. immediate involuntary action of any organ or part of the body in response to a particular stimulus. The nervous pathway taken by nerve impulses is a reflex action, is called reflex arc. This is called reflex arc. The path in which it is traveling, like you are seeing the blue ones and the red ones, this one and this one, is the reflex arc. The components that mediate a reflex usually include a receptor. So you have got a receptor, that is muscle spindle, receptor, and then afferent pathway, second one, and the third one, integrating center. So here is the integrating center, and then efferent pathway. This is the efferent pathway, and then effector. So this is the route in which these sensations and the orders, so suitable orders are passing, is called a reflex arc. So some common example of reflexes are, as I said, closing of eyes suddenly by you when strong light is flashed, and then of course very common for most of you when your favorite dish is served by your mummy or in our mess, immediately just by seeing, you are not even touched, you are not even tasted, but just by seeing it, the mere picture of it, you will get saliva in your mouth. So this is also a reflex action. Salivation, that's called. So production of saliva on seeing your favorite food is also a reflex. So reflexes are categorized into unconditioned and conditioned reflexes. Unconditioned reflexes are inborn, unlearned response to a stimulus or any change in the environment. Whereas conditioned reflexes are not inborn. Remember, they are not inborn, but are acquired on past experience, training, and learning. So conditioned reflexes were first demonstrated, of course, by a famous psychologist, all of you know, Ivan Pavlov's conditioning experiment, wherein a bell is rung, the cat goes and eats food. And of course, all of you are also under the influence of Pavlov's conditioning. When bell is given, you know that there is a tea break. You go and have your tea and snacks, right? So here you are also under the Pavlov's conditioning. This is conditioned reflexes. You will be waiting for the school bell to ring. And then for all this to happen, spinal cord is a must. And as I said, spinal cord plays a crucial role. Normally our spinal cord is 42 to 45 centimeters long. It extends from medulla oblongata, all of you know, and it is continuous to the level of second lumbar vertebrae, we say L2. It conducts impulses to and from the brain and controls most of the reflex activities and provides a means of communication between spinal nerves and the brain. It is formed of two types of neural tissue, internal gray matter and external white matter. The area, you are seeing internal gray matter and external white matter. The area within the vertebral column below the second lumbar vertebrae contains spinal nerves that are collectively called cauda equina. Cauda equina. The spinal cord ends as conus medullaris, from which the fine filament called filum terminale arises that anchors the spinal cord with the vertebral column. And then what you have been seeing it, the nerves that are running from backbone, and they come out, then these nerves constitute what we call peripheral nervous system. Periphery means outside. So small notes on this. So you got the entire process of response to a peripheral nervous stimulation that occurs involuntarily. This is most important. Without require the involvement of part of the central nervous system is reflex action. The reflex pathway comprises at least one afferent neuron, one efferent neuron, appropriately arranged in a series called reflex arc. And what about this peripheral nerves? So the nerves running outside the brain and the spinal cord constitute peripheral nervous system. these nerves, peripheral nerves, are of two types. One is cranial nerves, cranial brain. From brain, 12 pairs of nerves will be coming out. And from the spinal cord, 31 pairs of spinal nerves will be coming. So, the nerves that are coming from the cranium, brain nerves, olfactory, sensory nerves, optic, sensory, oculomotor, motor nerves, trochlear, motor, trigeminal, that is mixed trigeminal, and abducens, it's a motor one, facial, mixed, auditory, sensory, glossopharyngeal, mixed, vagus, mixed, spinal accessory, motor, and hypoglossal, again motor nerves. Whereas from backbone, spinal nerves are classified into 5 groups. These 8 pairs of cervical nerves will be there, cervix, 12 pairs of thoracic, that is chest region, 5 pairs of lumbar region, waist region, 5 pairs of sacral nerves, bottom one, and 1 pair of coccygeal nerve, coccygeal, last part of the backbone. So all these nerves coming out of the either brain or backbone will be spreading across our body and reach the destined areas. And what are those? We'll be talking about those in our next class, in our next session, that is sense organs. Okay, and how these nerves help the sense organs to perceive sensations, like how we are able to see, how we are able to hear, how we are able to smell. All this we'll discuss in our next class, that is tomorrow. Until then,